A paint drip splatters and runs, revealing a series of images. A woman playing violin, then in a bright pink costume, then in a blind skier pinning atop a mountain. The drip finally lands, revealing text in print and braille. Unsightly opinions.
Hi, welcome to Unsightly Opinions. My name's Tamara. Today I'm going to be sharing my top 15 parenting tips for raising kids with disabilities, in particular kids who might be blind or low vision. I have questions pop up all the time on a variety of different videos asking questions about how to parent their kids, what's going to be the best option, what do they do in X, Y, or Z circumstance, and I wanted to put a resource together all in one place where people can come and get some general tips and tricks to get you started. Why would you want to listen to me as a non-parent? I've been a disabled person for my entire life. I have been legally blind since birth. I have other physical disabilities, so I want to impart some of the gems that I've picked up along the way, some of the things I have learned from my parents who had very much a trial and error approach with me, and some of the things that I like to share with the families that I work with in my advocacy work. This video is about raising kids who might have a disability, not for parents with disabilities. If you are looking for parenting tips, there are some amazing channels out there. Check out Seeing Blind with Cindy. She's a blind mom extraordinaire. But without further ado, let's dive in and talk about what it's like from the parental perspective and what it's like from the child's perspective and what you can do to maximize success and independence. The first thing I often encounter when I'm working with young families is there's a lot of grief. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of blame that goes into having a child with a disability. That is a very normal process, and it can be very scary because as a parent, you don't know what your child's life is going to be. You know that it's going to have additional challenges, you know it's going to have additional work attached to it, but you don't know what is going to happen or what the options are or what comes next. So my first piece of advice is take the time you need to grieve and recognize that this life is not the end of the world. While it's not the same experience you have as an individual, it doesn't mean that your child is not going to be able to do things independently. It doesn't mean that they aren't going to be able to learn. It doesn't mean that they aren't going to be able to grow and do wonderful things with their life. I'm never going to minimize the challenges because each disability is fundamentally different and people may have one or even more disabilities. Take it one step at a time. Give yourself the time to process your own emotions so that your own grief doesn't translate to your child. Tip number 2, you don't need to be perfect, nor does your child. Have reasonable expectations for yourself and for your children. I have seen things go both ways, where people have no expectations of their child and their child doesn't amount to anything. Or you have expectations that your child achieves the same as or better than their able-bodied peers, and that's not healthy either, because one puts no pressure on the child to succeed, and one puts too much pressure on the child to succeed. You need to find a middle ground of reasonable expectations for both you and your child and cut both of you some slack when things don't necessarily go as planned. Tip number 3 is let your kids run around, let them get hurt, let them fall down. It's an important step on the journey of learning independence. People aren't always going to be around to assist your child, so fostering that sense of self-empowerment and fostering that sense of picking yourself back up again is a natural part of life for an able-bodied child and for a disabled child, but even more so important for a child with disabilities because there are going to be additional challenges that they're going to encounter throughout life, whether it be discrimination, not being able to access things appropriately. So teaching those skills early, they do translate into that strong sense of self as they develop. Children that aren't allowed to run around, that don't ever get hurt, that are coddled too much, are not going to grow up into independent individuals. So it's really important to let them have as much of a quote-unquote normal childhood as what you'd expect for their able-bodied peers. Tip number 4 is let your child experience everything, whatever they're encountering with all of of their senses. And this goes for just about every disability. Let them touch it, let them taste it, let them feel it, let them hear it, let them smell it. Using those other senses is going to help create a more broadened sense of what the world is around them. So taking the time to let them experience it in their own way, not the way that's necessarily the most socially appropriate, but in a way that's going to actually allow them to learn what something is, experience it to their fullest, and take something away from the experience. Tip number 5 is take the time to explain. I can't emphasize this one enough. Explain in a way that's going to make sense to your child. Don't rush them through something because it's going to be easier. While I know it can be frustrating at times, slowing down, taking a breath, explaining until they can explain it back to you is again going to foster that sense of properly learning what is happening around them and integrate socially a little bit better when you take the time to explain what others are doing as well as what they are doing and what the expectations may or may not be. Tip number 6, and I've touched on this briefly, explore with all of your senses. Multisensory learning has been proven over and over again to facilitate better learning, whether your child has a disability or not. Engaging all of the different parts of your brain, touch, smell, taste, whatever vision they might have, hearing, kinesthetic or body positioning, all of those are going to help your child learn and learn more efficiently. So incorporating those things, especially early in childhood, is going to lay a really strong foundation. Number 7, when somebody says no, don't necessarily take them at their word. It's an unfortunate truth that you are going to encounter a lot of roadblocks trying to raise your child, trying to incorporate them in sporting, in arts, in other extracurriculars, even in schooling. If somebody's telling you no and another child is able to do it, disability or not, don't take that at face value. So-called experts told my parents that I would never speak a second language, I would never learn to downhill ski, I would never learn to play an instrument, I would never learn to sew, I would never do any of dozens of things that I can do very successfully now as an adult. So just because somebody doesn't necessarily have the answers for you, doesn't necessarily know how to accommodate, it doesn't mean that there is no way to accommodate. That leads into my next point, which is advocate for your child. Push for them as much as you are able to, and I know it can be emotionally and physically exhausting. Be there for them. Show them that they are valid, they are allowed, they are able to do it, even if it's in a different way. And if they hate it, if they don't do well at it, okay, there are other things to try. And teach your child that same advocacy skills, because they are going to need to advocate on their behalf for the rest of their life. So the earlier you start teaching that, the earlier you start teaching what that means in terms of positive advocacy. I may not be able to do it this way, but can I try it like this? Or can we work together to find a solution so that I can do this too? Are great phrases to teach your child so they aren't left out, especially when they're working together in groups with their peers. Tip number 9, and this is a tough one for a lot of people, myself included. Be patient. Rome wasn't built in a day, and life is a journey, not a destination. So, not raising your voice, being kind, being compassionate, giving your child the space to experience what they're experiencing, and being a solid foundation for them to lean on is really important. This goes back to an earlier point. If you blow up, if something happens, if you lose your temper, if something spills or breaks, it happens. You're allowed to get angry. You don't have to be perfect. Do your best to be patient and take your time so that your child can get the most out of their life. Tip number 10, start teaching independent living skills and life skills early on. Earlier the better. Teach your child how to cut their food. Teach your child how to prepare food at an age-appropriate level. I know many 3-year-olds that can make themselves toast or pour themselves a bowl of cereal, clean up a mess after themselves. And as time goes on, increase the expectations. Just because your child has a disability doesn't mean they're never going to be able to do laundry, doesn't mean they're never going to be able to cook. They need to learn those skills. Make a hierarchical list. What's the most important to teach early, and then what to start teaching as they get older at each relative age range or as they progress to new skills. Some of the first ones I like to work on with families are toileting skills and personal hygiene skills, because when a child is very small, it's okay to help them, but as they move into their teen years, that's something that they really should, if they are able, be able to manage on their own. Obviously, some disabilities are not going to make that as independent, but if they are capable of it, it's something to work towards. Tip number 11, don't do things for your child that they can do for themselves. This goes back to that tip on patience. It may take your child longer. They may have to do it a different way. It may not be as efficient as you could do for them, but what child is efficient? Allowing them to learn and practice, repetition, over and over and over, they will improve, they will get faster. So doing things for them when they can do it themselves is going to foster a learned helplessness, which is not conducive to independence or being an adult, which is ultimately what you want to give your child, is their own life, their own experiences, and their own means of production. Tip number 13, not everything in their life should be related to their disability. Make sure you're giving them other outlets. The hyper focus is not constantly on the disability, because you want your child to feel normal in their own skin. You want your child to be independent and feel valued. And if there is a constant reminder of disability, you can't because of your disability, you won't because of your disability, that's not going to help them. So giving them as many experiences as you can that have nothing to do with their disability, or going through life and making the accommodation so they can be as independent as possible and not focus on their disability, is paramount to giving them the independence and giving them that self-empowerment, which I come back to over and over because it is so important. Tip number 14, let them interact with other kids with their similar disability. It's important that they feel they have a community of like-minded individuals that share the same setbacks or challenges that they do. Being able to interact in a way where people aren't saying you're weird is really important. Also, let your kids interact with other kids without a disability. It's important for both kids with a disability and without a disability to experience each other so that you create a broader sense of community where everyone is welcome. Number 14 is foster a creative outlet for frustration. While I am a strong proponent of independent living skills early, I am an even stronger proponent of giving kids tools to manage their frustrations. And oftentimes when kids have disabilities, we spend too much time focusing on teaching those life skills, teaching them how to be independent, trying to get them to do things on their own, and we don't give them enough time to actually process what they're feeling or do things that are enjoyable. So finding something that nurtures them, that brings them joy, is fundamental, whether that's sports, music, art, dance, whatever it might be. Let them experience that and let them have that time of free expression. And my final tip, be there unconditionally for them. Your kids need to be able to come to you when things don't go well. They need to be able to come to you when things get tough, because there will be times, despite all your best efforts, despite everything that you have done for them, things don't go to plan, that things are going to fall apart, that things aren't going to go their way, and you need to support them through that. Be their advocate, be their cheerleader, and sometimes be their warden and their guard, because you need to take on all of those roles to be a really great parent. And I'm sure 99.99% of you are already doing everything on this list. So I applaud you. You are doing a great job wherever you're at, and you take it one step at a time, one day at a time, and you'd be amazed what you can accomplish over time if you stick with it. But also remember, give yourself space, give yourself independence, give yourself room to feel the things that you need to feel. So I hope that was helpful. If you are a parent to kids with disabilities, please share your experiences down below if you're comfortable doing so. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Again, leave those in the description. If there are things that haven't been answered in this video that you'd like more information on, again, leave that down below. Happy to address it either in the comments or in another video. But that's all I have for you today. If you enjoy content like this, consider liking, engaging down below or on any of my other social media accounts, and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.